I don't want...
You too? My mother was from Galway.
Your masters, damn you for soiling your uniform. And that takes some earning. God help those who stand in our way. Come off the fucking Shelby!
Blinders. Understand.
I need a bottle of rum. Are you at home?
There's nothing anybody could do about it.
Have this.
Something about a robbery. Well, why not? Why not?
Come over.
Most crime shows are about criminals trying to get rich. Peaky Blinders is about something more dangerous. It's about a man who comes back from war already half dead inside, then spends the rest of his life trying to turn trauma into power. And the more power Tommy Shelby gains, the more the series asks a brutal question. What does victory even mean if every win costs him another piece of his soul? Because at first glance, Peaky Blinders looks like a stylish gangster story. Sharp suits, razor caps, smoke-filled rooms, horses, guns, whiskey, and men walking through fire like they own the street. But across the full series, from the first season in 1919 Birmingham to the final moments of season 6, the show becomes something much bigger. It becomes a story about class, family, empire, fascism, grief, guilt, and the strange curse of surviving when so many people around you don't. Tommy Shelby doesn't rise because he's the strongest man in Birmingham. He rises because he understands people better than they understand themselves. He reads fear. He reads greed. He reads weakness. And after the First World War, England is full of men pretending they're fine, full of institutions pretending they're noble, and full of old powers that never expect someone like Tommy to climb high enough to threaten them. That's the real engine of Peaky Blinders. It isn't just the gang. It's the collision between a working-class family from Small Heath and a country that still wants them to know their place. The story begins in Birmingham, just after World War I. The Shelby family runs the Peaky Blinders, a street gang with a reputation built on violence, betting, intimidation, and loyalty. They're feared locally, but not yet untouchable. They're dangerous, but still limited. They have the streets, the pubs, the betting shops, and the fear of ordinary people. What they don't have yet is the kind of power that changes laws, buys politicians, and turns criminals into businessmen. That dream belongs to Tommy Shelby. Cillian Murphy plays Tommy like a man whose face rarely tells the whole truth. His eyes are calm, but not peaceful. His voice is controlled, but not empty. He can sit in a room and make silence feel like a weapon. From the beginning, Tommy isn't written as a loud gangster boss. He's written as a strategist. His biggest gift is not violence, even though he can be violent. His biggest gift is timing. He knows when to wait, when to strike, when to offer someone a deal, and when to let them believe they made the choice themselves. But the show also makes one thing clear very early. Tommy's intelligence is tied to damage. He fought in the tunnels during the war. He came back with nightmares, opium, emotional distance, and a mind that never truly leaves the battlefield. In the trenches, survival depended on reading danger before it arrived. Back in Birmingham, Tommy turns that survival instinct into business. The same instincts that kept him alive in war make him almost unstoppable in crime. And that's why the first season works so well. It doesn't start with Tommy at the top. It starts with him seeing an opening. The Shelby family accidentally comes into possession of stolen guns, and that mistake becomes Tommy's opportunity. Those guns bring the attention of Inspector Campbell, sent from Belfast with the authority of Winston Churchill behind him. Campbell arrives as a man who believes he represents order, morality, and the state. But Peaky Blinders quickly shows that the official world is often just as dirty as the criminal one. Campbell talks about justice, but he is driven by obsession, control, and his own hunger for power. That contrast becomes one of the show's key ideas. The Shelbys are criminals, yes, but the police, politicians, aristocrats, military men, intelligence agents, and fascists they deal with are not clean alternatives. They simply have better uniforms, better accents, and better legal cover. Tommy understands this before almost anyone else. He knows the world is not divided between good men and bad men. It's divided between those who have power openly and those who have to steal it. Inside the Shelby family, the power structure is just as important as the external war. Arthur Shelby, played by Paul Anderson, is the older brother, but he isn't the true leader. Arthur is emotional, brutal, damaged, and desperate for purpose. He wants respect, but he also wants guidance. He wants to be feared, but he is often controlled by his own pain. Tommy loves Arthur, but he also uses him, and that becomes one of the most painful patterns in the series. John Shelby brings a younger, sharper energy. He's reckless, loyal, and quick to violence, but he also represents the kind of family soldier Tommy needs in the early years. Ada Shelby, the sister, gives the show a different angle. She begins outside the family business in spirit, especially through her relationship with Freddie Thorne, a communist and Tommy's former friend. Through Ada, Peaky Blinders shows the political world pressing against the criminal world. Class struggle is not background decoration here. It's part of the air these characters breathe. And then there is Polly Gray. Helen McCrory's Polly is not just the family matriarch. She is the emotional and strategic spine of the early series. While the men were away at war, Polly helped hold the business together. She knows the books, the streets, the family history, and the hidden wounds nobody else wants to name. Polly can be tender, terrifying, elegant, and ruthless in the same scene. She understands Tommy because she shares something with him, the ability to survive without ever fully healing. This is why the Shelby family feels alive from the beginning. They're not just gang members, they're a wounded household trying to become an empire. The first season also introduces Grace Burgess, one of the most important figures in Tommy's life. At first, Grace appears as a barmaid at the Garrison pub, but she is secretly working undercover for Campbell. Her mission is to get close to Tommy and help recover the stolen guns. On paper, this could be a simple betrayal plot, but Peaky Blinders makes it more complicated because Grace and Tommy recognize something in each other. Grace is lying to him, but she also sees the human being under the calculation. Tommy is manipulating her, but he also lets himself feel something he cannot fully control. Their relationship matters because Grace becomes one of the few people who makes Tommy imagine a life beyond war, crime, and strategy. Around her, the mask slips. Not completely, but enough. And for Tommy Shelby, even a small emotional opening is dangerous. Here's the thing that makes Season 1 more than just a gangster origin story. Every major conflict is really about legitimacy. Tommy wants the Peaky Blinders to become more than a street gang. Campbell wants to prove the state can crush disorder. Billy Kimber, the racing boss Tommy targets, represents the next level of criminal business. Freddie Thorne represents political resistance. Grace represents the possibility of love, but also the danger of trust. So when Tommy begins moving against Billy Kimber, he is not just trying to make more money, he is trying to enter a larger world. Horse racing gives him access to influence, betting gives him cash flow, violence gives him leverage, and the stolen guns give him bargaining power with people far above his station. This is one of the show's smartest early moves. It shows that Tommy's rise is not random. He doesn't simply fight his way upward. He studies systems and then finds the weak point. By the end of the first season, Tommy has defeated Kimber and expanded the Shelby operation. But the victory is not clean. Grace's betrayal is exposed. Campbell's obsession turns personal. Freddie and Ada's story shows the cost of politics and loyalty. And Tommy, for all his success, is left with the same emptiness that follows him through the entire series. He wins the war in front of him, but peace still doesn't come. That pattern repeats again and again across Peaky Blinders. Tommy solves the immediate problem, climbs higher, gains more money, more status, more fear, more influence. But each climb introduces a more dangerous enemy and a deeper internal cost. The show is built like a staircase where every step upward is also a step further away from the man Tommy might have been. Season 2 expands the world beyond Birmingham. London enters the picture. The Shelby Company begins moving into bigger criminal markets, and Tommy starts dealing with forces that are stranger, wealthier, and more unpredictable than the local bosses of Season 1. This is where Alfie Solomons arrives, played by Tom Hardy, and the entire rhythm of the series changes whenever he enters a room. Alfie is not like Tommy. Tommy is controlled, precise, and cold. Alfie is theatrical, funny, dangerous, and impossible to fully read. He speaks like a man constantly circling the truth without ever walking straight into it. But underneath the performance, Alfie is brilliant. He understands business, faith, betrayal, survival, and violence. His relationship with Tommy becomes one of the show's best long-running dynamics because neither man fully trusts the other, but both recognize the other's intelligence. They are enemies, partners, mirrors, and survivors. Season 2 also makes it clear that Tommy's ambition is pulling him toward the British establishment. He is no longer just dealing with rival gangs. He is becoming useful to powerful men. And that usefulness is dangerous because once the state realizes Tommy can do things respectable men cannot be seen doing, he becomes both valuable and disposable. That tension becomes central to the full series. Tommy wants legitimacy, but the legitimate world keeps using his criminality when it suits them. He wants to escape the mud, but the people in clean rooms keep sending him back into it. The second season pushes Tommy into a larger game involving Major Campbell again, Irish politics, London gangs, and the Epsom Derby. Campbell returns more bitter, more corrupt, and more personally fixated. His conflict with Tommy is no longer just about law and crime. It becomes about humiliation, masculinity, class, and control. Campbell hates Tommy not only because Tommy is a criminal, but because Tommy refuses to behave like a man beneath him. That is one of the hidden class tensions running through the show. The upper world can tolerate working-class criminals as long as they remain useful animals. What unsettles them is Tommy's intelligence, his discipline, and his refusal to stay in the role they assigned him. By the end of Season 2, Tommy is nearly executed in a field. He believes his time has finally run out, but at the last moment he is spared because more powerful people still have use for him. This moment is crucial because it reveals the next phase of the show. Tommy has risen high enough to attract the attention of forces beyond his control. He is no longer just fighting gangs. He is being recruited, trapped, and positioned by the state itself. And when he walks away from that field alive, it feels like a miracle. But in Peaky Blinders, survival is rarely mercy. It usually means the next cage has already been built. By Season 3, Peaky Blinders stops being only a story about expansion and becomes a story about contamination. Tommy Shelby has moved upward. He has money, a legal company, political contacts, a grander house, and a wedding that should represent his escape from the dirt of Small Heath. He has married Grace. He has become a father. On the surface, this should be the point where the gangster fantasy pays off. The man from the streets has broken into respectability. But Peaky Blinders understands something very sharp about Tommy. Respectability does not cure him. A bigger house does not make the nightmares smaller. A legal business does not erase the illegal one. A wedding ring does not turn him into a peaceful man. Instead, Season 3 shows that the higher Tommy climbs, the closer he gets to people whose crimes are protected by titles, churches, governments, and international politics. The season opens with Tommy and Grace's wedding, and that setting is important. It should be a family celebration, but it already feels tense. The Shelby brothers are surrounded by guests from a more refined world, and Tommy knows that one wrong move from Arthur, John, or any of the Blinders could expose how fragile this new respectability really is. He gives instructions, he controls the room, he tries to stage manage his own transformation. That's Tommy in one image, a man trying to command peace the same way he commands violence. But peace does not obey him. Grace's presence in Tommy's life matters because she represents the version of him that might still be reachable. With her, he can almost imagine stepping away from constant war. Not completely, because Tommy is never simple enough for that, but enough to make the dream feel real. She gives him a son, Charles. She gives him a home. She gives him something to lose that is not just business. And then the show takes her away. Grace's death is one of the major turning points in the entire series. She is killed at a charity event by a bullet meant for Tommy, connected to the Changretta vendetta. The scene is devastating not just because Tommy loses the woman he loves, but because it confirms his deepest fear. Anyone close to him can become payment for his ambition. From that point on, Tommy becomes even more haunted. He was already damaged by war, but Grace's death turns his pursuit of power into something colder and more punishing. He can still function, he can still plan, he can still defeat enemies. But emotionally, something inside him caves in, and the show never fully gives that back to him. This is why Season 3 feels darker and more complicated than the first 2 seasons. Tommy is not just fighting street rivals or police corruption anymore. He gets dragged into a dangerous arrangement involving Russian aristocrats, stolen jewels, political manipulation, and Father Hughes, one of the most disturbing villains in the series. Father Hughes is terrifying because he represents a different kind of evil. He is not a gangster in a pub. He is not a racing boss. He is not a policeman losing control. He is a man protected by institutions, hidden behind religion and power. Through him, Peaky Blinders shows that the respectable world can be far more monstrous than the streets. Men like Hughes don't need razor blades in their caps. They have networks. They have influence. They have children and families at their mercy. Tommy understands violence. He understands deals. He understands betrayal. But Hughes forces him into a world where every moral boundary has already been destroyed by people who still call themselves civilized. That is one of the reasons Tommy's rise starts to feel cursed. He wanted to reach the world above him, but the world above him is not cleaner. It is simply better at hiding its blood. Meanwhile, Arthur's arc deepens. Arthur is trying to become a better man, especially through his marriage to Linda. Linda wants him away from the worst of the Shelby business. She wants him to have faith, discipline, and a life not built on violence. But Arthur is trapped between 2 identities. One part of him wants salvation. Another part of him wants Tommy's approval, and Tommy knows exactly how to pull him back. That relationship is one of the saddest parts of Peaky Blinders. Tommy loves Arthur, but he also weaponizes him. He knows Arthur's weaknesses. He knows his guilt, his temper, his loyalty, his need to feel useful. And every time Arthur gets close to escaping the family machine, the machine pulls him back in. John's life also becomes more dangerous because of the family's expanding enemies. His arrogance, especially in the handling of the Changretta situation, helps create consequences that return later with brutal force. Peaky Blinders is very good at making violence feel delayed. A decision made in one season does not always explode immediately. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it travels through families. Sometimes it comes back wearing a black coat and carrying a name from the past. Polly, too, is forced into darker emotional territory. Her relationship with her son, Michael Gray, becomes central to the family's future. Michael enters the Shelby world as someone who seems cleaner than the others at first, but that innocence does not last. The longer he stays near Tommy, the more he absorbs the logic of power. Michael's arc across the series is not just about ambition. It is about inheritance. He inherits the Shelby name, the Shelby hunger, and eventually the Shelby belief that he might be the one clever enough to take control. But in Season 3, the family is still held together by Tommy's dominance. Everyone may question him, resent him, fear him, or hate what he asks of them, but he remains the center. His mind is the map. His plans are the road. And even when those plans wound the people around him, they keep following because nobody else seems capable of winning. The season builds toward Tommy rescuing his son and defeating Hughes, but the victory is ugly. There is no clean triumph. The child is saved, but the family is spiritually exhausted. Tommy has once again outmaneuvered powerful people, but the cost is everywhere. Grace is dead. Arthur is further broken. Michael is changed. Polly is shaken. And Tommy's business has become tied to forces far beyond ordinary crime. Then comes the shocking ending. Tommy has his own family arrested. At first, it feels like betrayal. Arthur, John, Michael, and Polly are taken away, and the family looks at Tommy as if he has finally crossed a line even they cannot forgive. but Tommy believes he has made a deal that will save them from execution and secure their future. This is classic Tommy Shelby logic. He accepts short-term hatred if he believes the long-term plan will work. But emotionally, the damage is enormous because family is supposed to be the one thing Tommy protects. His entire empire is built on that claim. Yet, again and again, he sacrifices the family's trust for strategy. He tells himself it is necessary. Sometimes it is. But the show keeps asking whether a man can keep calling something protection when everyone he protects ends up traumatized by his methods. Season 4 begins with that question hanging over everything. The Shelbys are saved from hanging at the last moment, but they do not return as a united family. They return angry, wounded, and separated. They have money, but not peace. They have survived, but survival has turned into resentment. Tommy has preserved the family physically while nearly destroying it emotionally. And then the past comes back in the form of Luca Changretta. Adrian Brody's Luca is a very different kind of enemy. He arrives from America with style, patience, and a personal vendetta. He is not just trying to take territory. He wants revenge for the death of his father, and he wants the Shelby family to feel hunted. This gives Season 4 a sharper, more direct threat than Season 3. After the complex political machinery of the previous season, Season 4 brings the story back to blood, family, and revenge. But because the show has already expanded the Shelby empire, the stakes are bigger now. The Peaky Blinders are not just street criminals defending a pub. They are a powerful family with factories, legal businesses, political contacts, and enemies on multiple fronts. Luca's vendetta threatens not only their lives but their entire myth. And the first major blow is John Shelby's death. John's killing is sudden, violent, and important because it reminds the audience that Peaky Blinders may be stylish, but its violence still has consequences. John was one of the original Shelby brothers. He was part of the family's early identity. His death changes the emotional balance of the show. It also proves that the Changrettas are not just another enemy Tommy can easily intimidate. For Arthur, John's death deepens the rage and grief already inside him. For Tommy, it becomes another calculation and another wound. For Esme, it is a breaking point that pushes her away from the Shelby family's world. And for the audience, it confirms that the show's rise has entered a harsher phase. The family can win, but they are no longer protected by being central characters. That is one of the smartest things Season 4 does. It makes Tommy's empire feel vulnerable again. Tommy responds to Luca the only way he knows how, by turning fear into strategy. He brings the family back together. He uses the threat to force unity. He studies Luca's pride, his family code, his assumptions, and once again, Tommy's greatest weapon is not the gun. It is his ability to understand what kind of story his enemy thinks he is in. Luca believes he is the Avenger. Tommy lets him believe that, then changes the ending. The conflict eventually turns through alliances, deception, and one of Tommy's most important advantages. He is willing to make deals with almost anyone if the deal keeps him alive. Alfie Solomons returns in this larger game, and his betrayal becomes one of the defining moments between him and Tommy. Alfie gives information to Luca, yet his motives remain tangled in survival, business, illness, and his own strange moral code. The confrontation between Tommy and Alfie on the beach is one of the show's most memorable scenes because it feels less like a normal revenge moment and more like two ghosts meeting at the edge of the world. Alfie has betrayed Tommy, but he also seems ready for the consequence. Tommy shoots him, and for a time the audience is led to believe Alfie is dead. But with Alfie, even death feels negotiable. Season 4 ends with Tommy defeating Luca and securing another major victory. But the more important development is not just the defeat of the Changrettas. It is Tommy's move into Parliament. He becomes a Labour MP for Birmingham South, stepping into formal politics and completing a transformation that began back in Season 1. The gangster from Small Heath has entered the House of Commons. On paper, this is the ultimate proof that Tommy Shelby has won. But Peaky Blinders never lets that victory feel simple. Because the moment Tommy enters politics, the show prepares its most dangerous question yet. What happens when a man who built his power through crime tries to fight evil inside the system? And what happens if the system is already infected? Continuing with verified Season 5 details, Tommy's failed Mosley assassination plan involved Barney Thompson as sniper, and the plan collapsed at the rally, leading directly into the Season 6 fallout. Season 5 begins with Tommy Shelby in a place that should look like triumph. He is now a member of Parliament. He has crossed the line that once separated men like him from the men who wrote the rules. He can walk into rooms where power speaks with polished accents. He can influence policy, gather intelligence, and use politics as another weapon. The boy from Small Heath has become part of the British state, but Peaky Blinders understands the irony. Tommy has entered the system at the exact moment the system is starting to rot. The season opens around the Wall Street crash of 1929, and that event matters because it strikes at the illusion of control. Tommy has built his empire on calculation. He studies risk, spreads influence, and tries to make every move before the enemy can see it coming. But the crash is different. It is not one man with a gun, one rival gang, one corrupt priest, or one police inspector. It is a global financial shock. It is money disappearing like smoke. It is the modern world reminding Tommy that even he cannot control every battlefield. Michael Gray, who has been handling business in America, becomes tied to this disaster. He has ignored instructions and exposed the company to major losses. This worsens the tension between him and Tommy, but the deeper issue is not just financial. Michael returns with Gina, his new wife, and with a different kind of confidence. He no longer feels like the young man learning the Shelby world. He feels like someone who believes he can improve it, maybe even replace the man at the top. That changes the family atmosphere. For years, Tommy has been the unquestioned mind of the operation. People challenge him, yes, but the structure remains clear. Tommy sees farther than everyone else. Tommy makes the impossible calls. Tommy gets them out alive. But Season 5 begins to show a new threat inside the family: succession. What happens when the next generation stops seeing Tommy as a genius and starts seeing him as an obstacle? Michael's proposal later in the season makes that tension explicit. He and Gina present a plan for restructuring the Shelby business, with the younger generation taking over and Tommy stepping aside. On the surface, it is a business proposal. Underneath, it is a declaration of war dressed in polite language, and Tommy feels it immediately. Because Tommy can forgive many things, but he cannot tolerate someone misreading the nature of power. To him, Michael is not just being ambitious. He is being naive. He thinks the empire can be modernized without understanding the blood that built it. He thinks he can inherit the crown without understanding that the crown is cursed. This is one of Season 5's best slow-burn conflicts. Michael is not simply wrong to want change. The Shelby world is destructive. Tommy's leadership has damaged everyone. But Michael's mistake is believing he can take the machine and make it clean while keeping the benefits of everything dirty that came before. That contradiction is exactly what Peaky Blinders keeps returning to. Everyone wants the rewards of the Shelby empire. Very few want to admit what those rewards cost. While the family fractures, Tommy faces a much larger danger in politics: Oswald Mosley. Mosley is one of the most chilling figures in the series because he does not arrive like a normal gangster villain. He does not need to shout. He does not need to prove he is violent in the ordinary way. His danger comes from charm, privilege, ideology, and timing. He understands that fear can be organized. He understands that economic collapse can be turned into anger. He understands that crowds can be seduced into cruelty if cruelty is dressed up as destiny. For Tommy, Mosley is different from almost every enemy before him. Billy Kimber wanted territory. Campbell wanted control. Hughes wanted power behind sacred cover. Luca wanted revenge. Mosley wants a movement, That makes him more dangerous than a man who simply wants Tommy dead. Mosley wants to reshape the country. He wants to turn resentment into political force. And because Tommy has entered Parliament, he is close enough to see how real the threat is. He recognizes evil not as street violence, but as ideology with a microphone. This is where Season 5 gives Tommy one of his most morally complicated missions. He appears to cooperate with Mosley, positioning himself close to the fascist movement, but he is also working with Winston Churchill and others to gather information and undermine Mosley from within. It is a dangerous double game, and it suits Tommy because deception is one of his natural languages. But there is a problem. Tommy can infiltrate enemies. He can manipulate criminals. He can survive rooms full of powerful men. What he cannot do anymore is fully trust his own mind. Throughout Season 5, Tommy's mental state becomes more visibly unstable. Grace appears to him in visions, calling him toward death. His trauma, grief, guilt, and exhaustion gather like a storm. For much of the series, Tommy's pain is controlled and hidden. In Season 5, the control starts to fail. He still commands rooms, but when he is alone, the silence becomes dangerous. This matters because Tommy's greatest strength has always been his mind. If that starts breaking, the entire empire becomes vulnerable. The show frames his hallucinations of Grace not as simple romantic longing, but as a death wish given a familiar face. Grace represents love, but in these visions she also represents release. She calls him away from the burden of survival. She tempts him with the idea that the only peace left is the peace of not fighting anymore. And this is why Season 5 feels so tense even before the finale. Tommy is not only fighting Mosley, Michael, economic collapse, and rival factions. He is fighting the part of himself that wants to stop. That inner conflict connects back to the war. The tunnels, the dead, the mud, and the ghosts were never truly behind him. Tommy became powerful by turning trauma into discipline, but trauma does not disappear just because it becomes useful. Eventually, the thing that fuels him also starts consuming him. Arthur, meanwhile, is also spiraling. His marriage to Linda continues to collapse under the weight of violence, addiction, faith, resentment, and the Shelby family's control. Arthur wants to be loved as a man, but he keeps being used as a weapon. Linda's frustration is not only that Arthur is violent, it is that Tommy always has a claim on him stronger than any promise Arthur makes at home. This gives Arthur's story a tragic loop. He keeps reaching for redemption, but he is most valued by the family when he is broken enough to be dangerous. Tommy needs Arthur's brutality, and Arthur needs Tommy's approval. That bond is love, but it is also a trap. Polly sees more clearly than almost anyone how poisonous the family structure has become. Her loyalty to Tommy is deep, but it is not blind. She understands Michael's ambition. She understands Tommy's ruthlessness. She understands that the family has survived by becoming harder, but hardness has not made them whole. Polly's role in Season 5 is especially powerful because she stands between the old Shelby world and the emerging challenge from Michael and Gina. And Gina is important because she changes the tone around Michael. She is stylish, confident, and difficult to read. She pushes him toward a more aggressive vision of power. With Gina beside him, Michael no longer feels like a nephew asking for a place. He feels like a rival presenting himself as the future. But while the family politics sharpen, Tommy's plan against Mosley becomes the season's main fuse. He decides Mosley must be killed. And because Tommy rarely does anything in a simple way, the plan is layered. He brings in Barney Thompson, an old war comrade and expert sniper who is being held in a psychiatric institution. Barney is another reminder of what the war did to men. He is not just a tool for the plot. He is a ghost from the same battlefield that made Tommy who he is. Tommy uses him because Barney can shoot, but the fact that he must pull a broken soldier back into violence adds another moral stain to the mission. The assassination is planned for a fascist rally. Tommy will be on stage, close enough to appear innocent, close enough to control the moment. Barney will shoot Mosley. Aberama Gold will use the chaos to kill Jimmy McCavern, who murdered his son Bonnie. The plan is brutal, risky, and precise. It should work because Thomas Shelby plans it, and that is exactly why the finale is so disturbing when it fails. At the rally, the pieces are in place. Mosley speaks to the crowd with frightening confidence. The atmosphere is ugly, charged, and theatrical. Peaky Blinders shows how fascism operates not only through ideas but through performance. The banners, the speeches, the crowd energy, the rhythm of belonging, it all turns politics into spectacle. Mosley understands the stage. He knows that power is not only exercised, it is displayed. Tommy waits for the moment, but someone knows the plan. Barney is killed before he can shoot. Aberama is attacked and killed before he can take revenge. Mosley survives, the assassination collapses, and Tommy, who has built his entire identity on being the man who sees everything before it happens, realizes he has been outplayed. This is one of the most important endings in the series because it breaks the usual pattern. Normally, Tommy suffers, adapts, and wins. The victory may be costly, but he still finds the hidden move. Here, he doesn't. He does not know who betrayed him. He does not know how the enemy got ahead of him. He does not know which piece of the board turned against him. For a man like Tommy, ignorance is torture. The final image of Season 5 takes him into a field with a gun to his head, screaming into the dark as Grace's vision calls to him. It is not just a cliffhanger. It is the clearest sign yet that Tommy's internal war has become as dangerous as any external enemy. The Empire is still standing. Mosley is still alive. The traitor is unknown. Aberama is dead. The family is fractured. And Thomas Shelby, the man who survived France, Birmingham, London, the Russians, the Changrettas, and Parliament, is now facing the one enemy he cannot intimidate, his own mind. That ending changes the entire direction of the final season, because Season 6 does not open like a normal continuation of a failed plan. It opens like a funeral for an era. Polly Gray is gone, and with her the series loses one of its most powerful centers. Inside the story, Polly's death is tied to the fallout from the failed Mosley assassination. Outside the story, the loss carries even greater weight because Helen McCrory died before the final season was made. The show handles her absence by making Polly's death a wound that never closes. Her presence is still everywhere, in Michael's anger, in Tommy's guilt, in Arthur's grief, and in the feeling that the Shelby family has lost its strongest spiritual force. Polly was not the leader in title, but she was often the person who understood the true cost of leadership. Without her, the family feels colder. Michael blames Tommy for Polly's death, and that blame becomes the emotional engine of his final conflict. To Michael, Tommy's ambition has finally taken the person who mattered most. He no longer wants reform. He wants revenge. The family succession drama has become blood debt, and Tommy enters Season 6 changed in another way too. He is sober. After years of whiskey, opium, and self-destruction, he has stopped drinking. On the surface, that should signal healing. But with Tommy, sobriety does not bring peace. It makes the pain sharper. It removes one layer of fog and leaves him face to face with everything he has done, everyone he has lost, and every ghost still walking beside him. The final season is slower, heavier, and more mournful because it is not just trying to top the previous threats. It is asking what remains after the rise. What remains after the money, after the politics, after the bodies, after the family has been used and used again? For Tommy Shelby, the answer is not victory, it is reckoning. Season 6 begins under the shadow of death, and that shadow changes the whole atmosphere of Peaky Blinders. The earlier seasons often moved like a machine. Plans, betrayals, deals, killings, victories. Even when the story was tragic, it had momentum. Tommy was always pushing forward, always finding the next move. But the final season feels different. It feels slower because the characters are no longer just running toward power. They are living inside the consequences of everything power has taken from them. Polly's absence is the deepest wound. Her death does not function like a normal plot point. It feels like a spiritual collapse. For years, Polly was the one person who could challenge Tommy without seeming smaller than him. She could curse him, protect him, read him, and cut through his lies. She understood the Shelby family not as an empire, but as a bloodline carrying grief from one generation to the next. So when she is gone, the show loses the person who could stand in the middle of the family and still hold some part of its soul together. Michael takes that loss and turns it into purpose. He believes Tommy is responsible. In the direct story logic, Polly dies because Tommy's failed assassination plot against Mosley exposed the family to retaliation. But emotionally, Michael sees something larger. He sees a lifetime of Tommy using people, taking risks, demanding loyalty, and surviving while others pay. Polly was his mother. To Michael, her death is the final proof that Tommy Shelby destroys everything he claims to protect. That is why Michael's revenge in the final season is not just a gangster rivalry. It is a family curse reaching its endpoint. Michael has always been positioned as a possible successor. He has Shelby blood, ambition, intelligence, and the coldness to make hard decisions. But he never had Tommy's experience. He never had the war. He never had the years of building power from the bottom. And that difference matters. Michael wants to defeat Tommy, but he also wants to prove he has become him. He wants to replace the king and inherit the kingdom. The tragedy is that by wanting Tommy's position, Michael confirms Tommy's influence over him. Even rebellion inside the Shelby family often becomes another form of imitation. Gina, meanwhile, connects Michael to a more international, modern, and politically dangerous world. Through her family and her circle, the final season brings Tommy back into contact with American power, fascist sympathies, money, and influence. The show's world is no longer just Birmingham, London, or the racetrack. It stretches across the Atlantic, into boardrooms, political dinners, and elite networks where ideology and business meet quietly behind closed doors. This is important because Peaky Blinders ends by showing that crime has changed shape. At the beginning, crime was visible. Men fought in streets. Guns were stolen. Bookmakers were threatened. Pubs were controlled. By the final season, the most dangerous people are not always carrying weapons. They are attending dinners, discussing policy, moving money, shaping alliances, and deciding which future they want to finance. Tommy fits into this world because he has spent years learning how power behaves. But he never truly belongs there. No matter how expensive his clothes become, no matter how large his house is, no matter what title he holds, the elite still see him as useful contamination. They admire his violence when it serves them, but they never forget where he came from. And Tommy never forgets either. That tension is part of why his relationship with Oswald Mosley remains so compelling. Mosley knows Tommy is dangerous, but he also believes Tommy can be managed. He sees him as a working-class weapon, a man of intelligence and brutality who can be pointed in useful directions. Tommy, on the other hand, sees Mosley clearly. He understands that Mosley represents a future where cruelty becomes organized, respectable, and national. But unlike earlier enemies, Mosley cannot simply be removed with one clever move. The failed assassination proved that. Mosley is protected not only by men with guns, but by institutions, class networks, political timing, and historical momentum. Tommy can kill many kinds of men. Killing a movement is different. That is why the final season feels less like a simple revenge story and more like a moral trap. Tommy is still trying to fight fascism from inside its circles, but the closer he gets, the more compromised he becomes. He sits with people he despises. He makes deals with people who would happily destroy everything he claims to value. He lies so often that even the people closest to him cannot always tell which version of him is real. Lizzie feels this more painfully than almost anyone. By the final season, Lizzie is not just Tommy's wife in name. She is the person forced to live beside his ghosts. She has seen the charm, the cruelty, the grief, the silence, and the way Tommy can be physically present while emotionally unreachable. Her tragedy is that she loves a man who keeps building walls out of his own pain and then acting surprised when nobody can get through. Their marriage becomes one of the saddest parts of season 6 because it shows the domestic cost of the Shelby myth. Tommy can dominate public rooms, but he cannot make his home safe. He can outthink enemies, but he cannot give Lizzie the emotional honesty she needs. He can protect his family from outside threats, but not from the atmosphere he creates inside the house. And then the death of Ruby Shelby breaks whatever illusion of stability remained. Ruby's illness and death become the emotional center of the final season. For Tommy, losing a child is not just another wound. It is a punishment that feels cosmic. He has spent years believing he can bargain with fate through intelligence, violence, money, and sacrifice. But Ruby's suffering is something he cannot command. He cannot intimidate illness. He cannot shoot grief. He cannot make a deal with death that will satisfy it. This storyline also pulls Tommy back toward Romani identity, curses, family history, and the buried spiritual world that has always existed around the edges of Peaky Blinders. The show has often balanced realism with a sense of fate. Dreams, omens, visions, and curses do not always operate like literal fantasy, but they matter because the characters believe in them, and belief shapes action. Tommy searches for answers because helplessness is unbearable to him. He would rather believe there is a curse he can trace, a person he can confront, a wrong he can correct, than accept that some losses have no strategy behind them. That is one of the most human things about him. His need for control is not only arrogance, it is terror. Ruby's death destroys Lizzie and Tommy in different ways. For Lizzie, it is the loss of her daughter and the final proof that life with Tommy will never stop taking. For Tommy, it becomes another ghost, another voice added to the choir of the dead that follows him. He has lost Grace. He has lost Polly. He has lost John. He has sent men to die. He has watched Arthur decay. He has sacrificed love, trust, and peace. But Ruby's death feels like the universe reaching into his home and taking something innocent. After that, Lizzie's decision to leave him carries real moral weight. It is not presented as simple betrayal. It feels like survival. Lizzie realizes that staying with Tommy means living inside an endless storm of grief, danger, and emotional absence. She cannot save him. She cannot compete with his dead. She cannot keep paying for his unfinished war with the world. And when she walks away, it exposes one of the final truths of the series. Tommy can win almost everything except a peaceful life with the people who love him. Arthur's decline in season 6 mirrors Tommy's in a different form. Arthur is consumed by addiction, grief, and self-disgust. Without Polly, without John, with Linda gone for much of his emotional life, and with Tommy still pulling him into dangerous work, Arthur becomes almost spectral. He is alive, but often barely functioning. The man who was once terrifying because of his explosive violence is now terrifying because he seems hollowed out. But Peaky Blinders never treats Arthur as only a monster. It keeps showing the wounded child inside the brutal man. Arthur wants forgiveness, he wants love, he wants God, family, and purpose. But he also knows what he has done. His pain is not innocent. That complexity is what makes him one of the show's strongest characters. He is both victim and weapon, brother and threat, man and myth. The final season also brings back one of the show's most beloved survivors, Alfie Solomons. Alfie's return matters because he represents a strange kind of continuity. He has been shot, betrayed, damaged, and isolated, yet he remains Alfie, funny, poetic, dangerous, and weirdly philosophical. His scenes with Tommy carry the weight of history. They have betrayed each other, helped each other, tried to kill each other, and somehow still share a bond that feels deeper than ordinary alliance. Alfie understands something about Tommy that many others miss. He sees the performance, he sees the curse of survival, he sees the business and the madness. Their conversations often sound like negotiations, but underneath them is recognition. Both men are living beyond the point where death should have taken them. both have become legends in worlds that consumed nearly everyone else. In Season 6, Tommy's plan involves the opium trade, Boston connections, and a final move against Michael. Once again, business, family revenge, and political danger overlap. This is classic Peaky Blinders structure. No conflict exists by itself. A business deal is also a trap. A family feud is also a power shift. A political alliance is also a moral compromise. Michael waits for his chance to kill Tommy. He believes the time has come. He believes Tommy is weaker, haunted, sick, and exposed. And for much of the season, Tommy does seem closer to death than ever before. The illness plot deepens that feeling. Tommy is told he has tuberculoma, a serious condition that appears to give him a death sentence. This diagnosis changes his behavior because it seems to confirm what he has felt for years, that his story is almost over. He begins arranging affairs, making final moves, and thinking about legacy. For a man like Tommy, even dying becomes something to organize. But the genius of the final twist is that Tommy's supposed illness is not what he thinks it is. He has been deceived. The diagnosis was part of a manipulation connected to Mosley's circle and Dr. Holford. Tommy discovers the truth after seeing Holford at Mosley's wedding in a newspaper image, realizing the doctor was not a neutral medical authority but tied to his enemies. This reveal reframes the final season. Tommy was not simply dying. He was being psychologically pushed toward death. That matters because it returns the final battle to the deepest theme of the show: control. Tommy's enemies do not just try to kill him physically. They try to make him accept death as inevitable. They try to make him destroy himself. And for a man already haunted by suicidal thoughts, grief, and exhaustion, that is a terrifyingly precise attack. But Tommy sees through it before the end. The final confrontation with Michael is cold and inevitable. Michael believes he has arranged Tommy's death through a car bomb. But Tommy has already anticipated the move. Johnny Dogs has helped switch the bomb, and the trap turns back on Michael's side. When Tommy faces Michael, there is no grand emotional reconciliation. There is no healing speech. There is only the tragic completion of a conflict that began as family tension and ended as execution. Tommy kills Michael, and that act lands heavily because Michael is not just another enemy. He is Polly's son. He is family. He is one possible future of the Shelby Empire. Killing him is not a normal victory. It is Tommy cutting away another branch of the family tree to keep himself alive. By this point, the question is not whether Tommy can win. He can. The question is what the word win even means anymore. Because after Michael is dead, after the plots are exposed, after Tommy learns he is not truly dying from the illness he was told he had, the series does something unexpected. It does not end with Tommy taking a throne, killing Mosley, or standing over a conquered empire. It ends with him letting part of himself burn. Tommy prepares to leave his old life behind. He holds a farewell gathering. He speaks with family. He appears ready to die, or at least to vanish from the world that made him. But after discovering the deception, he confronts Dr. Holford and has the chance to kill him. The old Tommy would likely have done it without hesitation. But he doesn't. That choice is one of the most important moments in the finale. It does not mean Tommy has become innocent. It does not erase the bodies behind him. It does not magically heal him. But it does show a shift. For once, he does not answer manipulation with murder. He refuses to complete the role his enemies prepared for him. Then he returns to find his wagon burning, destroying the material symbols of the life he was about to leave behind. His horse stands nearby, and Tommy rides away. The image feels mythic because it is not a neat ending. It is not full redemption. It is not punishment in the simple sense. It is a man escaping one death and riding toward an uncertain future, stripped of many of the things that defined him. Peaky Blinders ends its television story not by saying Tommy Shelby is saved, but by saying he is unfinished, and that is much more interesting. What makes Peaky Blinders last in the audience's mind is not just what happens, it's what everything means once the smoke clears. Because if you reduce the show to plot, it can sound like a chain of gangster conflicts. The Shelbys fight Billy Kimber, then London gangs, then aristocrats and priests, then the Changrettas, then Mosley, then Michael. Each season brings a new threat, a new alliance, a new betrayal, and a new level of power. But the reason the full series feels bigger than that is because every enemy reveals a different part of Tommy Shelby. Billy Kimber reveals Tommy the ambitious street strategist. Campbell reveals Tommy the working-class threat to official power. The Russians and Father Hughes reveal Tommy trapped inside elite corruption. Luca Changretta reveals Tommy as the head of a family that can bleed. Mosley reveals Tommy facing evil that cannot be solved like ordinary crime. Michael reveals Tommy confronting the cost of his own legacy. And by the end, Dr. Holford and the false diagnosis reveal something even more intimate. Tommy's enemies understand that the surest way to destroy him is not to beat him in a gunfight, but to convince him that death is the only ending he deserves. That is why the final season's twist works thematically. It is not just a surprise that Tommy is not dying from the illness he was told he had. It is a final test of whether Tommy will accept the story others have written for him. The establishment, the fascists, the doctors, the old powers, they all try to place him back inside a role. The violent man, the useful criminal, the doomed gangster, the working-class weapon that can be used and discarded. But Tommy's last choice is to step outside the script. He does not kill Holford. He does not complete the revenge cycle in the expected way. He does not return to the family table as the same commander. He rides away, and the show leaves him in motion. That ending refuses to give us full comfort because Tommy has not earned simple peace. But it also refuses to trap him forever in the same darkness. The man who believed he was already dead discovers he is still alive. And for Tommy Shelby, being alive may be the hardest punishment and the only possible chance. To understand why that matters, we have to go back to the beginning and look at the most important hidden structure of the series. Peaky Blinders is not really about a criminal becoming powerful. It is about a survivor trying to turn survival into meaning. Tommy comes home from World War I changed beyond recognition. The show never needs to show us every detail of the tunnels to make us feel their impact. We see the war in his sleeplessness, in his emotional distance, in the way he can stand in danger without seeming surprised, in the way he treats peace as temporary, in the way he always expects betrayal because war taught him that safety is a lie. That trauma gives him an advantage in the criminal world. Other men fear death more than he does. Other men need comfort more than he does. Other men hesitate at lines he has already crossed in his mind. Tommy can walk into high-risk situations because part of him has never fully left the battlefield. He is already living after the worst thing he can imagine. But the show's tragedy is that this advantage is also his prison. The same numbness that makes him powerful makes intimacy almost impossible. The same strategic mind that saves the family turns everyone around him into pieces on a board. The same fearlessness that lets him rise makes him careless with his own soul. He knows how to survive danger, but he does not know how to live without danger. That is why peace always fails around him. Whenever Tommy gets close to something like ordinary happiness, the show reveals how fragile it is. Grace offers him love, but his enemies kill her. Lizzie offers him loyalty and family, but he cannot stop bringing the war home. His children offer him a future, but he cannot protect Ruby. His brothers offer him blood loyalty, but the Shelby business consumes them. Even his move into politics, which should be the highest form of legitimacy, only brings him closer to a larger darkness. Tommy keeps trying to climb out of violence by using violence, and that contradiction defines him. He wants the Shelby family to become legitimate, but the foundation of that legitimacy is fear. He wants his children to inherit safety, but he builds that safety by making enemies who can reach into his home. He wants to defeat men worse than himself, but he often has to become useful to them first. He wants to save the future from fascism, but he is still a man who has built his own kingdom through domination. Peaky Blinders never asks us to forget Tommy's crimes. That is important. The show may make him charismatic. It may frame him beautifully. It may give him the walk, the coat, the music, the cigarette, the perfect line at the perfect moment. But underneath the style, it keeps showing the bill. People die because of Tommy's choices. People are traumatized by his plans. People love him and are punished for it. People follow him and lose themselves. The danger of Tommy Shelby is that he often wins just enough to make everyone believe the next risk will be worth it. That is how he keeps the family moving. And that brings us to the Shelby family itself, the real heart of the series. The family is Tommy's reason, his weapon, his weakness, and his excuse. He says he does everything for the family, and often he believes it. But the show keeps complicating that claim, because at a certain point, the family is not only what Tommy protects, it is what he uses to justify his need for control. Arthur is the clearest example. Arthur is the older brother, but Tommy becomes the leader because Arthur cannot carry the weight. That reversal creates a wound that never fully heals. Arthur wants to be respected as the eldest, but he also knows Tommy is the mind of the family. He depends on Tommy's direction, even when that direction destroys him, and Tommy depends on Arthur's violence, even when he knows violence is destroying Arthur. Their relationship is love mixed with exploitation. Tommy knows Arthur is fragile. He knows Arthur is desperate for approval. He knows Arthur's rage can be activated. And again, he sends Arthur into darkness because the family needs a monster, and Arthur is the one most easily turned into one. But Arthur is not only a victim of Tommy. He makes choices. He hurts people. He terrifies people. He fails the people who love him. That complexity is why his arc is so painful. He is a man with enough conscience to suffer, but not enough freedom to escape. He wants God, Linda, sobriety, family, and forgiveness, but the old life keeps calling him back in Tommy's voice. John, by contrast, represents the cost of growing up inside violence without Tommy's level of calculation. John is brave, loyal, and dangerous, but he is also impulsive. He believes in the family's power so strongly that he sometimes underestimates the consequences of insulting the wrong enemy. His death in Season 4 is shocking because it cuts through the Shelby myth. The family's reputation cannot protect everyone. The name Shelby is not armor. It is also a target. Ada's arc is different because she begins as the Shelby who wants distance. Through Freddie Thorne and her political sympathies, she stands partly outside the criminal machine. She sees the family from a moral and ideological angle that the brothers often avoid. But over time, even Ada is pulled closer to the business and the politics around it. Her journey shows how hard it is to truly leave a family like this. Blood keeps calling, crisis keeps returning, and Tommy, whether she likes it or not, keeps needing her intelligence. Ada becomes especially important because she can speak to Tommy without worshiping him. She is not dazzled by the myth. She knows the boy, the brother, the manipulator, and the damaged man behind the title. In a series full of men performing power, Ada often cuts through performance with plain truth. Polly is even more central. If Tommy is the head of the Shelby empire, Polly is its memory. She remembers what the family was before the rise. She understands the old wounds, the hidden losses, the spiritual weight, and the emotional cost. She can operate in business, but she also carries the family's grief in a way Tommy tries to avoid. That is why her scenes with Tommy have such force. She is not just advising him, she is judging the direction of the bloodline. Polly also understands power as a woman in a world of violent men. She knows when to use charm, when to use threat, when to use silence, and when to remind the men that their empire survived partly because women held things together while they were gone. Her strength is not imitation of male violence. It is something sharper, older, and more emotionally intelligent. Her relationship with Michael introduces one of the show's great generational tensions. Polly wants her son safe, but the family world seduces him. Michael's transformation from outsider to ambitious rival shows how the Shelby machine reproduces itself. He comes in with distance, then learns the taste of power, then starts imagining himself as the future. By the time he turns against Tommy, he is not rejecting the Shelby way completely. He is trying to claim it. That is the tragic irony. Michael hates what Tommy has done, but he becomes dangerous by absorbing Tommy's lessons. The women of Peaky Blinders often reveal truths the men are too proud to admit. Grace reveals Tommy's longing for peace. May Carlton reveals his attraction to status and the world above him. Lizzie reveals the daily emotional cost of loving him. Linda reveals the impossible struggle to pull Arthur out of the family's violence. Esme reveals how the Shelby name can destroy anyone who marries into it. Gina reveals the next generation's colder, more corporate ambition. None of these women exist only as decoration when the show is at its strongest. They expose different forms of power and different forms of damage. Grace is especially important because her death changes the emotional temperature of the entire series. Before Grace dies, Tommy can still imagine transformation as something personal. He might become legitimate. He might become a husband. He might become a father in a home not ruled by fear. After Grace dies, those possibilities do not vanish completely, but they become ghostly. Tommy continues living, but part of his hope is buried with her. That is why Grace returns as a vision. She is not only the woman he loved, she is the life he failed to protect. She is the peace that became impossible. And when she appears to him later, especially during his suicidal moments, she represents both comfort and danger. The dead in Peaky Blinders are never simply gone. They become voices, symbols, pressures, and unfinished conversations. This is also why Ruby's death cuts so deeply. Grace's death taught Tommy that love could be taken as punishment for his life. Ruby's death teaches him something worse. Innocence can be taken even when no strategy can stop it. That breaks his illusion of control in a different way. He can blame enemies for Grace. He can blame war, business, and betrayal for many losses. But Ruby's illness brings him face to face with helplessness. And Tommy Shelby may be able to face death, but helplessness is something he cannot bear. That is why the final season's spiritual elements matter. The curses, visions, and Romani beliefs are not just atmosphere. They externalize Tommy's need to find meaning in suffering. If there is a curse, then there is a cause. If there is a cause, maybe there is a correction. But if there is no cause, then grief is just grief, and that is far more terrifying to a man who survives by solving problems. Peaky Blinders often lives in that space between realism and myth. On one level, it is a historical crime drama about Birmingham gangsters, political unrest, and the rise of fascism between the wars. On another level, it is almost a dark legend about a cursed family, a war-haunted king, and the ghosts that follow blood money. The show's style supports that legend. The slow-motion walks, the modern music, the industrial smoke, the fire, the horses, the black coats, none of it is purely realistic. It is emotional realism. It shows us how these characters feel inside their own myth. That style is one reason the series became so iconic. The Peaky look is instantly recognizable. The suits, caps, undercuts, boots, and long coats turn the gang into silhouettes. They seem to arrive as a force of nature. And the use of modern music, instead of only period-accurate sound, gives the show a rebellious energy. It tells the audience not to watch this as a museum piece. Watch it as something alive, aggressive, and emotionally current. That choice also helps explain why Peaky Blinders reached audiences far beyond a typical British period crime drama. It takes a specific historical setting and gives it the pulse of modern anxiety. Economic collapse, political extremism, class anger, trauma after war, corrupt institutions, men performing strength while falling apart inside. These themes do not feel trapped in the 1920s or 1930s. They feel disturbingly present, and that is where Oswald Mosley becomes such an important late-series antagonist. Mosley is not just another villain in the lineup. He changes the scale of the show's moral battlefield. With him, The enemy is not merely crime. It is organized hatred. It is the transformation of fear into politics. It is the way elites can flirt with brutality while calling it order. Tommy has spent his life among violent men, but Mosley represents a violence that wants to become national policy. Tommy's decision to fight him from inside the movement gives the final seasons their larger historical weight. It also reveals Tommy's complicated morality. He is not a good man in the clean sense, but he knows what Mosley is. He recognizes a form of evil that even he cannot tolerate. And that recognition matters. The show does not redeem Tommy by making him anti-fascist. It simply shows that morality can exist in damaged people in uneven, contradictory ways. Tommy may be ruthless, manipulative, and guilty of terrible acts, but he still understands that some futures must be resisted. That contradiction is what keeps him compelling. A simple hero would not fit Peaky Blinders. A simple villain would not hold 6 seasons. Tommy Shelby lasts because he is both magnetic and morally exhausting. We want him to win, then we question what winning means. We admire his intelligence, then recoil from how he uses it. We feel his pain, but we cannot pretend pain excuses everything. We see the boy damaged by war, the brother trying to lift his family, the father grieving his child, and the criminal who leaves bodies behind him. All of those versions are true, and the series never lets one erase the others. One of the smartest things Peaky Blinders does is make power feel addictive before it makes power feel poisonous. In the early seasons, Tommy's rise has a thrill to it. The Shelby family is underestimated. The police look down on them. Rival gangs think they can be contained. Wealthy men assume they can be used and thrown away. So when Tommy outmaneuvers them, there is a real satisfaction. The audience enjoys watching someone from the margins break into rooms that were never meant for him. That is part of the show's appeal. Peaky Blinders understands the fantasy of power. It understands the pleasure of watching Tommy walk into a room already 5 moves ahead. It understands why viewers remember the suits, the cigarettes, the cold lines, the music, and the slow-motion entrances. The show makes the Shelby rise feel operatic. It gives working-class ambition the scale of myth. But then, slowly, it changes the taste. The same power that looked exciting begins to look like a trap. The same control that made Tommy impressive begins to make him unreachable. The same family loyalty that felt noble begins to feel suffocating. The same violence that once seemed like survival becomes routine. By the final seasons, the audience is not simply asking, how will Tommy win? The deeper question becomes, can any of this still be worth winning? That change is what separates Peaky Blinders from a simple gangster fantasy. The show seduces you with the image, then forces you to look at the damage behind it. And that damage is everywhere. Small Heath is not just a location. It is the origin point of the Shelby identity. The smoke, factories, canals, betting shops, and backstreets create a world where survival has always required toughness. The Shelbys are not born into comfort. They come from a place where class is not an abstract idea. It is physical. It is in the houses, the labor, the dirt, the hunger, the accent, the way authorities treat people, and the limited routes available to anyone who wants more. This is why Tommy's ambition is not only personal ego, it is also class revenge. He does not just want money. He wants to stand in front of people who once would have dismissed him and make them answer to him. He wants to buy land, influence elections, control legal businesses, and sit across from aristocrats as an equal or a threat. He wants the world that humiliated people like him to recognize that he cannot be ignored. But Peaky Blinders is honest enough to show that class revenge can become indistinguishable from the hunger to dominate. Tommy does not only want a seat at the table. Sometimes he wants to own the table, choose who sits there, and decide who gets removed. The injustice he experienced does not prevent him from becoming unjust to others. In fact, it often becomes the fuel that helps him justify whatever he does next. This is one of the show's most mature ideas. Being oppressed does not automatically make a person morally pure. Being wounded does not automatically make a person safe. Tommy's pain explains him, but it does not absolve him. His background gives his rise meaning, but it does not erase the people crushed beneath that rise. The series keeps both truths alive, which is why the character remains so rich. The business side of the show also reflects this transformation. In the beginning, the Shelby operation feels local and physical. They fix races, they run betting shops, they intimidate rivals. Money moves through hands, ledgers, and pubs. But as the seasons progress, the business becomes more abstract and more dangerous. Legal companies, political favors, exports, opium, international connections, parliamentary influence. The operation becomes cleaner on paper and dirtier in consequence. That is a key irony. The more legitimate the Shelby company becomes, the more morally complicated it gets. Street crime is visible. Corporate crime can be hidden behind documents. Violence in an alley is obvious. Violence through influence, policy, trade, and alliances can be harder to see. By moving Tommy upward, the show does not move him out of crime. It reveals that crime and power have always been closer than respectable society wants to admit. This is why Tommy's world keeps overlapping with politics. At first, politics enters through Freddie Thorne, Ada, communism, labor struggle, police repression, and the post-war working-class atmosphere. These threads remind us that the Shelbys are not operating in a vacuum. Their world is shaped by strikes, poverty, ideology, and a state nervous about unrest. Later, politics becomes more direct when Tommy enters Parliament and faces Mosley's fascist movement. Across the full series, politics is not background flavor. It is the larger version of the same power struggle. Who gets protected? Who gets punished? Who gets called a criminal? Who gets called a gentleman? Who gets to use violence legally? Who gets erased when history is written? Peaky Blinders keeps returning to those questions, even when it is moving through personal revenge or family betrayal. The First World War is the invisible foundation beneath all of this. Almost every major male character in the Shelby circle is shaped by it. Tommy, Arthur, John, Danny Whizbang, Barney Thompson, and others carry the war into civilian life. The war does not end for them when the fighting stops. It becomes behavior. It becomes addiction. It becomes silence. It becomes sudden violence. It becomes the inability to imagine a normal future. The show's post-war setting is crucial because Britain itself is also pretending to move on. The country wants ceremonies, order, and a return to hierarchy. But the men who came back are not the same men who left. They have seen industrialized death. They have lived through conditions that make ordinary morality feel fragile. And when they return to poverty, limited opportunity, and old-class barriers, the promise of national gratitude feels hollow. Tommy's criminal ambition grows out of that hollowness. He gave his body and mind to a country that still sees him as disposable, so he decides to become undefeasible. That is one reason his relationship with Churchill and state power is so layered. The state uses Tommy because he can operate in places official men cannot. It needs him dirty but controlled. It values his effectiveness while keeping moral distance from him. This arrangement exposes the hypocrisy of power. Respectable men may condemn criminals in public while relying on them in private. Tommy knows this. He resents it, but he also benefits from it. He becomes the man who can cross between worlds, criminal and political, working class and elite, legal and illegal, soldier and businessman. But crossing between worlds also means he never fully belongs in any of them. That loneliness defines him. Even within his own family, Tommy is often alone. He sits at the head of the table, but leadership isolates him. He knows too much, hides too much, plans too much. He rarely explains the full picture because full explanation would require trust, and trust is dangerous. So he gives orders, makes secret deals, and lets people hate him for decisions he believes are necessary. Sometimes he is right. Sometimes he is catastrophically wrong. But either way, the result is the same: distance. The family depends on Tommy, but they cannot fully reach him. Lizzie lives with him, but cannot truly enter the locked rooms of his mind. Arthur loves him, but is damaged by that love. Ada sees through him, but cannot save him. Polly understands him, but cannot stop him. Michael studies him, then turns against him. His children need a father, but Tommy is often more available to ghosts and enemies than to the living people in front of him. That is the tragedy of a man who becomes a myth. A myth can be admired. A myth can be feared, but a myth cannot sit at a table and simply be human. Peaky Blinders also uses repetition beautifully to show the prison of Tommy's life. Again and again, he tries to move from one phase into another, from gang leader to businessman, from businessman to legitimate power broker, from widower to husband again, from criminal to politician, from alcoholic to sober man, from doomed patient to survivor. Each transformation is real but incomplete. He changes, but he does not escape. The past keeps returning in new costumes. Old violence becomes new revenge. Old trauma becomes new hallucinations. Old family decisions become future betrayals. Old enemies disappear, then leave consequences behind. Even when Tommy steps into Parliament, small Heath comes with him. Even when he stands in a grand house, the tunnels of France are still under his feet. That is why the show's visual world matters so much. Smoke follows these characters everywhere. Fire keeps returning. Horses appear like symbols from an older world inside an industrial one. Tommy's black horse and his connection to racing tie him to control, fate, and his Romani heritage. The factories and furnaces make Birmingham feel like a place where people are forged and burned at the same time. The Garrison pub functions almost like a throne room, a confessional, and a battlefield depending on the scene. Even the famous Peaky Blinders walk is meaningful when you look beyond the style. The family moves as one body, as if unity itself is intimidation, but over the seasons, that formation becomes harder to sustain. John dies. Polly is gone. Michael turns. Arthur deteriorates. Ada moves between distance and duty. By the end, the image of the united Shelby front has been broken by grief. That is why the final episodes feel so haunted. The show is not only ending a plot, it is dismantling an icon. For years, the Shelby family looked unstoppable. By season 6, we understand that unstoppable does not mean unharmed. It may simply mean they keep moving after losing pieces of themselves that can never be replaced. This also explains the importance of faith and superstition in the series. Characters pray, curse, interpret dreams, fear omens, and speak of fate. In a purely rational crime drama, those elements might feel out of place. But in Peaky Blinders, they are essential because the characters live in a world where ordinary logic cannot explain the amount of suffering they carry. Tommy often behaves like a rational strategist, but he is surrounded by signs and ghosts. He may not always admit belief, but he cannot escape the symbolic world of his family. Polly's spiritual instincts, Ruby's visions, the curses, the graveyards, the horses, the fires, all of it suggests that the Shelby story is not only about decisions, it is about inheritance. Not inheritance in the simple sense of money or property. Inheritance as burden. The children inherit names before they understand what those names cost. Michael inherits Shelby ambition. Duke, introduced late in the series as Tommy's son, suggests another branch of the bloodline entering the story. Charlie inherits a father who is legendary but emotionally unreachable. Ruby inherits danger she never chose. Even Ada's child is born into the shadow of family politics and violence. The question becomes, can any child of the Shelby world truly be free of it? The series does not give an easy answer. Tommy wants to build a future, but he keeps using the tools of the past. He wants his children protected, but protection often means more deals, more enemies, and more secrecy. He wants the family name to rise, but the higher it rises, the more dangerous it becomes to carry. That is the curse of the Shelbys, not magic in the simple sense. A pattern of trauma, ambition, violence, loyalty, and silence passing from one person to another until somebody breaks it or is broken by it. By the final episode, Tommy's decision to ride away can be read as an attempt to break that pattern. He removes himself from the center. He allows the old symbols to burn. He does not return to the same table and continue the same cycle as if nothing has changed. But the show is careful not to overstate this. Tommy riding away is not the same as Tommy becoming pure. He is still Tommy Shelby. The past still exists. The dead are still dead. The damage remains. But possibility remains too. That possibility is what makes the ending linger. If the finale had simply killed Tommy, the story would have closed around punishment. If it had crowned him victorious, the story would have ignored too much pain. Instead, it leaves him alive, stripped down, and moving into uncertainty. For a man who has spent the entire series trying to control endings, uncertainty is almost a form of rebirth. And maybe that is the point. Peaky Blinders was never building toward a clean moral verdict. It was building toward a confrontation between the man Tommy became and the man he might still choose to be. The show's most famous line, "By order of the Peaky Blinders," sounds like a declaration of control. But the full series slowly reveals that control is the illusion Tommy keeps chasing. He can order men, he can order companies, he can order killings, he can order deals, elections, shipments, and betrayals. He cannot order grief. He cannot order love to survive. He cannot order the dead to be quiet. He cannot order history to stop repeating itself. And he cannot order his own soul to heal on command. That is why the ending does not show him as a man who has conquered everything. It shows him as a man who has finally lost enough illusions to begin again, if beginning again is even possible. The power of Peaky Blinders is that it lets us feel both sides at once. The thrill of the rise, the poison of the rise, the beauty of the myth, the horror underneath the myth, the love inside the family, the damage done in the name of family, the intelligence of Tommy Shelby, and the terrible loneliness of being Tommy Shelby. Another reason Peaky Blinders works so well is that it understands villains as reflections, not just obstacles. Each major enemy is built to challenge a different weakness in Tommy Shelby's world. They are not interchangeable. They don't simply arrive, threaten the family, and disappear. The best of them expose something Tommy does not want to face. Inspector Campbell exposes Tommy's hatred of authority and the hypocrisy of official morality. Campbell arrives as the face of law, but the more time we spend with him, the more we see that law can be driven by obsession, ego, and cruelty. He wants to defeat Tommy, but he also becomes fascinated by him. He wants Grace, but he cannot accept her emotional independence. He wants to represent order, but he becomes increasingly disordered inside. That makes Campbell a strong early antagonist because he destroys the fantasy that the legal world is clean. From the first season onward, Peaky Blinders refuses to say that Tommy is bad and the system is good. Instead, it shows a world where everyone is compromised, but only some people have the privilege of calling their violence justice. Billy Kimber serves a different function. He is the first major criminal boss Tommy must overtake. Kimber represents the existing criminal order, the man with more territory, more reputation, and more established power. By defeating him, Tommy proves he is not just a clever local gangster. He proves he can understand a system, disrupt it, and replace the man sitting above him. That is the first true step in the Shelby rise. Alfie Solomons is more complicated because he is not only a villain, he is a rival, partner, betrayer, survivor, and almost a kind of dark friend. Alfie's power comes from unpredictability. With Tommy, you feel calculation. With Alfie, you feel calculation disguised as chaos. He can sound distracted, philosophical, comic, and threatening all in the same breath. But beneath that performance, he is always watching the money, the leverage, and the moral weakness in the room. Alfie matters because he is one of the few characters who can meet Tommy as an equal without wanting to become him. He does not worship Tommy. He does not underestimate him either. Their relationship works because both men know betrayal is part of business, yet somehow each betrayal feels personal. They understand each other too well to be simple enemies. Father Hughes represents institutional evil. He is terrifying because he hides behind respectability, religion, and elite networks. In the world of Peaky Blinders, street violence is often honest in its ugliness. Hughes is different. He is corruption dressed as holiness. He shows Tommy that the higher levels of power are not cleaner than small heath. They are often more depraved and more protected. The Russian aristocrats in Season 3 deepen that same idea. They represent old-world decadence, exile, wealth, and danger. Their world is glamorous but rotten. Around them, Tommy is not simply climbing upward. He is entering rooms where madness and privilege have learned to dance together. The contrast is important. The Shelbys may be brutal, but the aristocratic world is not morally superior. It is simply better decorated. Luca Changretta is the enemy who brings the story back to blood. After Season 3's conspiracies and political machinery, Luca's vendetta feels direct. He wants the Shelbys dead because family blood has been spilled. That makes him a mirror of Tommy in a sharp way. Both men believe in family. Both men understand violence as inheritance. Both men use style, patience, and reputation as weapons. But Luca is also important because he proves the Shelby family can be hit where it hurts. John dies. The family scatters. The myth of invulnerability cracks. Jimmy McCavern and the Billy Boys introduce a more openly sectarian and fascist-adjacent brutality into the world before Mosley fully dominates the political stage. McCavern is not only dangerous because of violence, he belongs to a wider atmosphere of hatred and intimidation. He shows the street-level version of the uglier politics rising in the background. Then, Mosley arrives as the most historically dangerous figure Tommy faces. What makes Mosley so effective is that he cannot be reduced to personal revenge. He does not need Tommy's business in the simple way other enemies do. He does not need to prove himself on the street. He represents ideology, class confidence, and political seduction. He has the ability to turn private prejudice into public movement. He makes hatred sound organized. He makes cruelty sound elegant. He makes the future itself feel threatened. For Tommy, this is the enemy who cannot be defeated by the usual Shelby method. You can shoot a gangster. You can bribe a policeman. You can blackmail an aristocrat. You can betray a rival before he betrays you. But Mosley's power is not only in his body. It is in networks, symbols, followers, speeches, newspapers, money, and history. Killing him would not automatically kill what he represents. That is why Tommy's failed assassination plan is so important. It is the moment when the audience sees the limit of his usual genius. He has planned impossible operations before. He has survived traps before. But here, he miscalculates. Or more precisely, someone else calculates around him. The plan collapses, Mosley lives, and Tommy is left without the one thing that always stabilizes him, the belief that he knows the hidden shape of the board. By the final season, the threat shifts again. Michael is family. Dr. Holford is deception. The enemy is no longer only outside the house or inside politics. It is inside Tommy's bloodline, inside his body, inside his mind. That is the natural endpoint of the show's villain structure. The first enemies tried to stop Tommy's rise. The final enemies try to make him destroy himself. This progression gives the series a powerful shape. The battles move from streets to institutions, to ideology, to the soul. That is also why Peaky Blinders is not just remembered for its plot. It is remembered for atmosphere, character, and escalation. The show keeps widening the battlefield while narrowing the emotional focus. The world gets bigger, but Tommy's inner prison gets smaller. The historical setting gives this escalation extra weight. The series begins after World War I, during a period when Britain is wounded, economically strained, politically unstable, and socially divided. It moves through the 1920s and into the early 1930s, when the rise of fascism in Europe begins to cast a longer shadow. That timeline matters because the show is not simply using history as costume. It is showing how private trauma and public crisis feed each other. Men broken by war return to a society that wants productivity but not pain. Working-class communities are expected to endure poverty, while elites protect their privileges. Political movements compete to explain suffering. Criminal organizations exploit gaps in law and opportunity. Business, empire, and ideology begin to merge in dangerous ways. Tommy Shelby is a fictional character, but he makes sense in that world. He is the product of a broken century, and that is why the show's modern music and stylized visuals feel strangely appropriate. They remind us that the emotional patterns are not safely buried in the past. Economic panic, extremist politics, class resentment, traumatized veterans, corrupt institutions, family loyalty turning toxic, these are not dead issues. The show uses the past to speak in a modern emotional language. That is part of the reason it became such a cultural phenomenon. Peaky Blinders has an aesthetic people immediately recognize, but the aesthetic would not matter if there were no pain underneath it. The suits are beautiful because they look like armor. The cigarettes are memorable because they become part of Tommy's ritual of control. The slow walks are thrilling because they turn wounded people into legends for a few seconds. The music hits because it makes old streets feel alive with modern rage. The style is not separate from the story. It is how the story mythologizes trauma. But there is a danger in that myth, and the show knows it. Viewers can easily romanticize Tommy Shelby. They can see only the confidence, the clothes, the intelligence, the power, the calm voice, the fearless stare. But the full series keeps pushing against that shallow reading. It shows the destroyed marriages, the addicted brother, the dead relatives, the frightened children, the lonely rooms, the hallucinations, the suicidal despair. The myth is attractive. The reality is ruin. That tension is why Tommy remains fascinating. He is both aspirational and cautionary. People admire his discipline and strategic mind. But the show asks us to notice that he has almost no peace. People admire his loyalty to family, but the show asks us to notice how often family becomes the language he uses to demand sacrifice. People admire his rise from poverty, but the show asks us to notice what he becomes while rising. Peaky Blinders never fully condemns ambition. It understands why ambition matters, especially for people denied ordinary routes to dignity. Tommy's desire to rise is not ridiculous. It is not simply greed. It is rooted in class, war, and survival. But ambition without healing becomes conquest, and conquest without limits becomes a curse. This is why the Shelby family meetings are often so tense. On paper, they are business discussions. In reality, they are emotional battlegrounds. Every person at the table has a different relationship to Tommy's power. Arthur wants approval. Polly wants control and protection. Ada wants distance and truth. Michael wants inheritance. John wants action and loyalty. Lizzie wants honesty and home. Each person is connected by blood or marriage or history, but none of them experience the empire the same way. Tommy often speaks as if the family has one shared interest. The show proves they do not. What protects Tommy's vision may destroy Arthur's recovery. What expands the company may endanger Lizzie's children. What secures power may violate Polly's instincts. What looks like opportunity to Michael may look like betrayal to Tommy. The phrase, "for the family," becomes more complicated every season because the family is not one body. It is a group of wounded people being pulled behind one man's idea of destiny. And destiny is one of Tommy's favorite illusions. He often acts like he is choosing freely, but he is trapped by patterns he cannot stop repeating. He tells himself each violent act is the last necessary one. Each deal is the one that will secure the future. Each betrayal is temporary. Each sacrifice will be justified by the final outcome. But there is always another enemy, another deal, another body, another ghost. This is how the series turns strategy into tragedy. Tommy is brilliant enough to escape almost any trap except the trap of believing the next victory will finally make him free. That is why the final image of him riding away matters so much. The wagon burns, the old life is symbolically destroyed, and Tommy does not return to reclaim the ashes. For once, the answer is not more control. The answer is movement without certainty. It is tempting to call that redemption, but Peaky Blinders is wiser than that. Redemption would require more than survival. It would require repair, confession, and a reckoning with the people left behind. Tommy has not fully done that. He has not undone the harm. He has not brought back the dead. He has not healed Arthur, restored Lizzie, saved Michael, or destroyed Mosley. The world is still dangerous. The future is still unresolved. But the ending offers a different word: possibility. Tommy has been given the chance to not die according to someone else's design. He has been given the chance to not kill when killing is expected. He has been given the chance to step away from the role of doomed gangster king. Whether he can become someone else is unanswered. And that unanswered space is powerful because Peaky Blinders has always been about the cost of identity. Tommy became Tommy Shelby so completely that the name itself became a weapon. By the end, the question is whether there is any person left underneath the weapon. The series does not tell us. It lets him ride. That choice also preserves the myth while breaking it open. Tommy remains legendary, but not settled. He survives, but not comfortably. He wins, but not completely. He escapes death, but not consequence. He leaves, but he does not vanish from meaning. And that is why the show's ending works better than a simple final shootout would have. A final shootout would have confirmed the surface myth. This ending challenges it. It asks us to sit with a man who has spent 6 seasons trying to master fate, only to discover that the most radical act left to him may be refusing the ending prepared for him. Looking back across the full series, the structure becomes clear. Season 1 is the rise from local gang to serious power. Season 2 is expansion into London and state manipulation. Season 3 is contamination by elite corruption and the loss of Grace. Season 4 is blood revenge and the return of family vulnerability. Season 5 is political darkness, fascism, and mental collapse. Season 6 is grief, false death, family reckoning, and uncertain rebirth. Each season changes the scale. But the core question remains the same. Can Tommy Shelby use power to escape pain, or will power only give pain a larger kingdom? The answer, by the end, is brutal. Power can protect him. Power can enrich him. Power can make him feared, respected, and historically significant. But power cannot love him back. Power cannot forgive him. Power cannot quiet the dead. Power cannot give him the peace he keeps mistaking for the next victory. That is the final truth hiding under all the style. Peaky Blinders is not a celebration of gangster power. It is a funeral march disguised as a rise-to-power story. It lets us enjoy the smoke and thunder, then leaves us with the silence after the gunfire. It makes Tommy iconic, then asks what an icon has to lose before people realize he is also a man. And in that sense, the show's greatest achievement is balance. It is cool without being empty. It is violent without being only violent. It is stylish without letting style erase grief. It is mythic without forgetting class, trauma, and history. It gives us one of modern television's most memorable anti-heroes, then refuses to let us worship him without consequence. Tommy Shelby begins the series as a man trying to build an empire out of the ruins of war. He ends it as a man standing among the ruins of that empire, alive when he expected death, free only because the old story has burned behind him. And maybe that is the closest Peaky Blinders can come to hope. Not happiness, not innocence, not clean redemption. Just a man, a horse, a road, and the possibility that for once, the next step does not have to be ordered by the past. The lasting impact of Peaky Blinders comes from the way it turns a specific family story into a larger myth about the modern world. On the surface, the show belongs to a familiar tradition, gangsters rising through violence, loyalty, betrayal, and ambition. But its deeper identity is more unusual. It is a post-war ghost story wearing the clothes of a crime drama. Every major character is haunted by something: war, poverty, class, religion, family, love, death. The past is not behind them. It sits in the room, pours the whiskey, sharpens the blade, and waits for the next generation to repeat the same mistakes. That is why the show's title itself becomes more than a gang name. The Peaky Blinders begin as a local force, a feared street gang with a sharp visual identity and a reputation for brutality. But by the end, Peaky Blinders means something larger. It means a family myth. It means a business empire. It means a political weapon. It means the story Tommy tells the world so that nobody sees how damaged he really is. The cap, the suit, the walk, the cigarette, the phrase, all of it becomes armor. And like all armor, it protects the body while trapping the person inside. Tommy Shelby's greatest tragedy is that he becomes unbelievably good at being the version of himself the world fears. He becomes the man who does not blink, the man who can lose almost anyone and still make the next move, the man who can speak softly in a room full of enemies and still control the temperature, the man who knows how to turn grief into strategy before grief has even finished arriving. But every time he does that, something human is pushed further down. That is why the show's quieter moments matter as much as its explosive ones. Tommy sitting alone, Tommy hearing Grace, Tommy staring into fire, Tommy standing near a horse, Tommy with his children, unable to fully cross the distance between fatherhood and the battlefield still alive inside him. These moments remind us that the real story is not only what Tommy does to other people, it is what being Tommy Shelby does to Tommy Shelby. The series also succeeds because it gives its world texture. Birmingham is not just a backdrop. It feels like a furnace where people are made hard because softness is too expensive. The industrial landscape gives the show a visual soul: smoke, metal, mud, flame, brick, canal water, and narrow streets. It is a world where the air itself seems heavy with labor and violence. Then, as Tommy rises, the settings change. Country houses, London clubs, parliament, aristocratic parties, political meetings, international business rooms. But the show never lets us forget Small Heath. No matter how far Tommy travels, he carries that place with him. His accent, his instincts, his resentment, his loyalty, and his hunger all come from there. That is part of the show's class politics. Tommy's rise is thrilling because he breaks into spaces designed to exclude him. But it is disturbing because he often adopts the cruelty of the people he despises. He learns their language. He uses their methods. He joins their games. He proves he can beat them, but the victory is complicated because beating them does not necessarily build a better world. Sometimes it only means a Shelby now has the knife. This is where the show becomes more than a gangster fantasy. It understands that power does not automatically liberate the person who gains it. Power can become another prison. Tommy escapes poverty, but not fear. He escapes obscurity, but not loneliness. He escapes ordinary limits, but not death, grief, or guilt. He becomes important enough for politicians to use him, but that importance makes him more trapped, not less. The production style reinforces this idea. The series uses modern music, heightened imagery, and carefully staged entrances to make the Shelby world feel legendary. That choice could have become shallow if the writing did not carry emotional weight. But because the characters are so wounded, the style becomes part of the meaning. The show is not saying these people are simply cool. It is showing how damaged people create myth around themselves so the world sees power instead of pain. The music makes them feel larger than life. The story reminds us that larger than life is not the same as happy. That is one reason audiences responded so strongly to Tommy Shelby. He is not relatable in a simple everyday way. Most viewers are not gang leaders, politicians, or criminal strategists, but the emotional engine underneath him is recognizable: the desire to control life after being hurt by it, the desire to become untouchable after feeling powerless, the desire to protect family while also being the reason family is in danger, the desire to be seen, respected, feared, and loved while not knowing how to receive love when it arrives. Tommy is extreme, but the wound is human. Arthur's wound is human too. His story is one of the clearest warnings in the series. Violence gives him identity, but it also destroys him. He is useful when he is terrifying, so the people around him keep needing him terrifying. That is a terrible thing to do to a man who is already broken. Arthur's tragedy is that he wants salvation but keeps being pulled back into the role of family weapon. Polly's importance is human in a different way. She carries memory, grief, intuition, and authority. She sees the family's spiritual damage before others name it. Her absence in the final season hurts because she was one of the few people who could make the Shelby empire feel emotionally accountable. Without her, the family becomes colder, more brittle, and more exposed to its own worst instincts. Ada's strength lies in perspective. She is close enough to know the family, but distant enough to judge it. She sees the political world and the family world at the same time. She understands Tommy's brilliance, but she does not mistake brilliance for goodness. Through Ada, the show often finds a clearer moral voice without turning her into an outsider who simply condemns everything. Lizzie's story may be one of the most painful because she lives with the cost of Tommy's emotional absence every day. She is not fooled by the legend. She knows the man in the house, the man after the speeches, the man after the deals, the man who can share a room with her and still be somewhere else entirely. Her decision to leave after Ruby's death is not just a personal break. It is the show acknowledging that love cannot survive forever on loyalty alone. Michael's ending is tragic because he becomes both victim and threat. He loses Polly, and his hatred of Tommy has emotional truth behind it, but he also chooses revenge, ambition, and the same cold logic he believes he is opposing. His death is not satisfying in a simple way because it is family killing family. It is the Shelby machine consuming another possible future. And that is one of the show's darkest ideas. The Shelby family does not only defeat enemies, it also produces them. People enter Tommy's orbit and are changed by it. Some become stronger, some become richer, some become more powerful, but almost nobody remains untouched. The family name offers protection and status, but it also brings danger, moral compromise, and grief. To be a Shelby is to inherit both a shield and a curse. That is why the ending cannot be neat. A neat ending would betray the show's own understanding of consequence. Tommy cannot simply apologize and be free. He cannot kill one last enemy and be clean. He cannot return home and pretend the family is healed. Too much has happened. Too many people are dead. Too many relationships have been broken by years of secrecy, violence, and control. So the finale gives him something more uncertain. A chance, not a reward, not forgiveness, a chance. He discovers that his supposed death sentence was a lie. He realizes he has been manipulated by people connected to the same circles of power he has been trying to fight. He confronts the doctor who helped push him toward death, and in that moment, he has the opportunity to do what Tommy Shelby has done so many times before: punish, execute, close the circle with violence. But he refuses. That refusal matters because it is small but radical for him. Tommy's life has been built on answering threat with control. Here, he chooses not to let his enemies define his final act. He chooses not to become the ending they expected. He chooses to leave a man alive, not because the man deserves mercy in some simple way, but because Tommy needs to break the pattern for himself. Then the wagon burns. The image is perfect because fire has followed the series from the beginning. Fire can destroy, but it can also clear. Tommy's possessions, symbols, and old life burn behind him. He does not save them. He rides away. The road ahead is unknown. That unknown road is the final gift of the series. For 6 seasons, Tommy has tried to know everything in advance. He has tried to plan every move, read every enemy, and force the future into shape. The final image denies him certainty, and in a strange way, that denial is freedom. He is alive without a fixed script. He is no longer riding toward a guaranteed victory or a guaranteed death. He is just riding. That is why Peaky Blinders ends not with total closure, but with mythic suspension. Tommy Shelby remains unfinished. The family remains changed. Mosley's larger historical shadow remains unresolved inside the world of the show. Arthur remains damaged. Ada remains capable. Lizzie remains gone from Tommy's emotional reach. Polly remains absent but spiritually present. The dead remain dead. The past remains real. But the old command has weakened. By order of the Peaky Blinders, once meant Tommy could impose his will on the world. By the end, the world has answered back. It has taken his wife, his daughter, his aunt, his brother, his peace, his certainty, and nearly his will to live. The command still echoes, but it no longer sounds invincible. It sounds haunted. And that is why the series holds up. It gives viewers the thrill of power, then reveals the grief underneath. It gives us a gangster king, then strips away the kingdom piece by piece. It gives us unforgettable style, then makes sure the style is soaked in consequence. It lets us admire Tommy's mind while never letting us forget the bodies behind his success. Peaky Blinders is ultimately about what happens when a man tries to build a future using the weapons that destroyed his past. Tommy Shelby survives the war, but he brings the war home. He builds a family empire, but the empire damages the family. He seeks legitimacy, but legitimacy exposes deeper corruption. He enters politics, but politics reveals a larger violence. He tries to master death, but death keeps taking people he loves. He believes control will save him, but control becomes the cage. That is the full tragedy and power of the show. Not that Tommy loses everything, not that Tommy wins everything, but that every win and every loss become part of the same question. After a life built on survival, can a man still learn how to live? The final answer is not spoken. It rides away with him. And maybe that is the only honest ending for Peaky Blinders. Because a story this haunted should not close with a simple moral. It should close with smoke, fire, a horse, a road, and the feeling that the legend is still moving somewhere beyond the frame. If you want more full series breakdowns in this style, stay with Series Span Cinema, because Peaky Blinders is not just remembered for the razor caps, the suits, or the line everyone quotes. It is remembered because underneath all of that, it told a story about a broken man who kept winning battles while losing parts of himself until the final battle was no longer against a rival gang, a corrupt priest, a fascist politician, or a family traitor. The final battle was against the belief that he was already dead. And for the first time in a long time, Tommy Shelby chose to live without knowing exactly what came next.